We're going to go ahead and get this event started. First and foremost, thank you and welcome to the Spokane City Council chambers here. We've got an interesting discussion that we're going to be engaging in here over the next hour or so, depending upon how many questions we end up getting. Obviously, you've got a 4-member panel made up of some very distinguished and knowledgeable people. We'll have them introduce themselves to you here in just a little bit. In case you don't know, my name is Mike Fagan, and I am with Spokane City Council, and I would like to welcome everybody here. This is an opportunity as well as an issue where all of us, regardless of whatever our political persuasions are, we all need to be coming together because this is a serious issue that affects everybody. Right. It affects conservatives, liberals, Democrats, Republicans, union members, non-union members. We're talking about jobs, we're talking about our economy, we're talking about things that are going on globally here with the United States in a position to give up a little bit more sovereignty every step of the way. So, to open this event today, let me go ahead and read to you a little bit and give you a little bit of an idea of the specific reasons why we're here and what it is that we're going to be talking about. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, is a proposed regional regulatory investment treaty. There are 12 Asia-Pacific countries and the U.S. that will be participating in this particular treaty if it is ratified. This treaty is intended to enhance trade and investment among the TPP partner countries, to promote innovation, economic growth and development, and to support the creation and retention of jobs. I wish I could believe that. The Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, also known as the TTIP, is a proposed free trade agreement between the European Union and the United States. Proponents say that this agreement would result in a multilateral economic growth situation. POTUS, or the President of the United States, is trying to secure fast-track authority for these trade agreements that, when negotiated, Congress will only be able to approve or disapprove, but cannot amend or filibuster. It's an up or down vote, and Congress basically has no further say. This kind of power, in my opinion, is extremely dangerous because, as we saw with some of the other treaties, specifically NAFTA and GAFTA, our standard of living has decreased as the deficit surges higher. We saw unaccountable judges in treaty-established tribunals make awards of up to $360 million in taxpayer money to foreign firms, and there is currently a backlog of up to $12.4 billion yet to be awarded. Since the middle of the 90s, NAFTA has been cited to have caused the elimination of nearly 5 million U.S. manufacturing jobs. Food imports from Canada and Mexico have doubled under NAFTA, and the price of food has risen nearly 70%. I kind of think that you get the picture now with these examples, and you are going to be hearing more. Both of these treaties, i.e. the TPP and the TTIP, are definitely bad news for Americans, and I'm thankful that everybody, again, from all political persuasions have come together here this afternoon to learn a little bit more and maybe leave this event with some action items that will be effective in stopping this. So with that, let's go ahead and have our esteemed panel members. From Chris, go ahead and introduce yourself and just what is it that you do for a living?
My name is Chris Nearson. I'm a small businessman in Spokane Valley and a longtime political activist.
Okay, I'm Bob Chase, and I'm currently Spokane County Treasurer, and I've also been a longtime grassroots activist.
My name is Jim Robinson, longtime grassroots activist, involved in conservative efforts and essentially with an overriding goal of attempting to restore our republic to what it was when I was a small boy in the 50s.
Bonnie Mager, former county commissioner and longtime neighborhood activist.
Thank you very much for that, esteemed panel members. And with that, I think we're going to go ahead and start off with Rob.
Okay, thank you, City of Spokane, for allowing this venue for us to talk about the common cause that we found. And all of us are friends here. We've known each other for a little while. And even though we come across the spectrum of grassroots activists, we found that there are sort of things that we find common cause in. And the problem is that the grassroots, I think the powers that be are always trying to divide us, you know. And when we're fighting over things that we don't really need to, we're not very effective, and meanwhile we're getting fleeced by the powers that be. So that's a real problem. We start talking about this. Let's talk about the things we do agree upon. And for instance, we talked about GMO food legislation. That's very important. The encroaching surveillance state is another one. Campaign finance reform, possibly public banking. However, the most impending issues are fast-track authority to negotiate international agreements. And the agreements themselves, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a lot like NAFTA, only having to do with the Far East, and TTIP, T-T-I-P, which is Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, too, which is kind of like NAFTA, but only with Europe, the European Union. So we have to ask ourselves, who benefits and who loses? Well, it seems that those who benefit are the multinational corporations. Who loses? We the people lose. And this goes back to the concept of global governance, quite a ways. In 1935, historian and well-connected elitist Arnold Toynbee said, "At the present, we are working discreetly, but with all of our might, to wrest this mysterious force called sovereignty out of the clutches of the local nation-states of our world. At the same time, we are denying with our lips what we are doing with our hands." Arnold Toynbee also said America would not end in murder, it would end in suicide. In 1995, Secretary of State Warren Christopher said, "The long-term objective is the integration of the economies of North America and Europe." Also in 1995, Zbigniew Brzezinski said, "We cannot leap into world government in one quick step. The precondition for genuine globalization is progressive regionalization." And this, the history of this is in Europe. In 1952, it started out pretty small. In 1952, they formed the European Coal and Steel Community, which consisted of an agreement between 6 nations. In 1957, the Treaty of Rome used this group to form the European Economic Community. In 1992, the Maastricht Treaty established the European Union. In 2007, the Lisbon Treaty wrote the European Union Constitution. Currently, what we call the PIGS countries, Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain, are quickly getting gutted by the signing on to derivatives, with no votes, and putting their fate into the hands of corporations like Goldman Sachs. Likewise, in the United States, in 1989, George H.W. Bush signed the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. In 1994, President Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich shepherded through the NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, which allowed American companies to move their operations to Mexico and ship goods back to the United States with no hassle. Keep in mind, Mexico doesn't have an EPA to enforce clean water or clean air standards. The first of these things we really need to stop, we the people, is TPA, Trade Promotion Authority, better known as Fast Track, except they changed the name to make it sound more innocent. It's an unconstitutional premise because Article 1, Section 8 gives power to regulate commerce with foreign nations to the legislative, not the executive branch. I contend that an unconstitutional law is really no law at all, but that doesn't keep them from enforcing it. Fast Track Authority gives the President authority to rush through, with no transparency or debate, elements of trade agreements. In the Trans-Pacific Partnership, there's 29 chapters. 5 of them have to do about trade. Okay? There's another 5 that was leaked by WikiLeaks, and what we've seen out of that, it had to do with enhancing the surveillance state and restricting internet freedom. The other 19 chapters we know nothing about. They're not even shared with Congress. So TPA, there's kind of a little list already of what it can do. It can authorize the president to select the issues that will be negotiated. It authorizes the president to sign those pacts without prior congressional approval. It authorizes the president to include in these agreements not only changes in tariffs and quotas, but also federal, state, and local laws on taxes, food and health safety, patents, financial regulation, copyrights, trademarks, immigration, environment, and labor standards. It authorizes the president advisory system consisting of 700 industry representatives who are appointed by the president. It grants these corporate advisors access to the confidential negotiating documents that are kept secret from Congress and the public. It empowers the president to draft the Trans-Pacific Partnership and other treaties, legislation without congressional input. It prohibits any amendments to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, either in committee or during floor debate. It limits floor debate in each house to 20 hours. It requires only a simple majority vote in each house. And once ratified, the Trans-Pacific Partnership changes federal, state, and local laws, and that cannot be altered without 100% approval by all the other nations in the pact. So any laws, any changes in U.S. law that happen out of this are effectively permanent. So let's talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. President Obama said that the Trans-Pacific Partnership will support millions of good-paying American jobs. Well, isn't that what they said about NAFTA too? Economic integration, harmonization, and convergence, even on a local scale, rob us of our autonomy. These agreements take decisions away from our courts and give them to an international court. Businessmen who don't play along, don't play with the game, are at a disadvantage. They're planning economic and political integration of regional nations, indeed even social engineering integrations. So in closing, I contend that we are better off before these supposed free trade agreements. So who benefits? Multinational corporations, not we the people. These people already have lots of money, but what they really want is power and control. So why should we resist this? The ultimate goal is a one-world government through regionalization. Do we want our posterity to live in never-ending 1984? We have a long series of presidents and Congresses who have traded away our freedoms to the big corporations. They did this either through ignorance or malevolence. Both are bad. Power can corrupt even at the local level, but it would be pyramid at the global level. Our elected representatives are supposed to have our backs. In return, we pay them, inform them, and we correct them too. That is the social contract we live under. When Benjamin Franklin exited Independence Hall after the signing of the Constitution, he was approached by Mrs. Paul. She asked him whether we had a monarchy or a republic. He replied, "A republic if you can keep it." Currently, all of our federal, statewide representatives and senators are poised to vote for Fast Track and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The main obstacle to world government is America and its Constitution. We must tell our representatives, number one, we don't approve of the Trade Promotion Authority, Fast Track. We don't approve of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and we do not approve the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Posterity. They are not good for America. They will destroy our republic. Please represent us, we the people, and not allow this to happen. Thank you.
Is that next?
Excuse me. Thank you. I want to thank everyone for coming. I've been involved in organizing this Common Cause Coalition of Eastern Washington. You know, I think it's important that we start a dialogue and maintain a dialogue with the people from the opposite side of the political spectrum. I'm quite confident that there will be other issues that are going to arise in the future that we could utilize this coalition to, amplify our voice, to amplify the voice of the critical thinkers. And so I appreciate everyone coming here and supporting it. The TPP, the TTIP and trade authority are immensely complex issues. The TPP has 29 chapters, and all being kept in secret. So, through various leaks, we were able to get kind of a shadow. We get an impression of what these treaties are going to mean. And we also learn what's in them by the ones that have been passed, that are already passed. And that it seems as this process goes on, they become more and more extreme. They become more tyrannizing as time goes by. And so today I'm going to speak just briefly on the Food Safety issue and the Regulatory Cooperation Council. And what has been learned about the Regulatory Cooperation Council was from a leak in Europe. So this is out of the TTIP. And from conference calls and things that I've been on, I've learned that there's a little more leaking going on around the TTIP than there has been around the TPP. So what is about to happen if this treaty passes is that the treaty calls for what they call a Regulatory Cooperation Council. And this would be an international body that would oversee any new regulations that any country would like to propose, and that would continually look at and try to harmonize the regulations that exist among the member nations. This is particularly a dangerous thing for a variety of reasons. The Regulatory Council's mandate is that it seeks to implement regulations that interfere with trade the least. So basically what that means is that the country with the lowest standards will become the standards for all the signature countries. It also requires that any new regulation be submitted to this Regulatory Cooperation Council for a 1-year period of review. Now, this may seem reasonable on the surface, but when you consider the advances and how fast particularly food technology is changing, and to hamstring the government in terms of implementing any kind of regulation or the ability to ban unsafe foods and unsafe food processing techniques, that those products would be on the market for a year, right, before they could be banned. And a good example of what this regulatory cooperation means is that under NAFTA, there was a WTO case brought by the beef producers of Canada and Mexico when the United States wanted to label beef produced in Canada and Mexico as such. And that case went before the WTO, World Trade Organization, and the United States lost, okay? And that was under NAFTA. And so, you can see that these treaties are going to separate us from real basic rights. And I think it is a very basic right to know where your food is being produced, okay? So that we can safely protect our families and have safe food and not be put in a position where we don't really know where it came from, and we don't know if it's particularly safe. The other thing that's pointed out in the leaks regarding this Regulatory Cooperation Council is it does its work in secret. Okay, there's no transparency. This is a basic robbing of our rights as citizens. That we have the right to know what the government is doing. Okay, and setting up these supranational councils and boards and legal systems is simply a way to rob us of our sovereignty and to rob us of our rights as citizens. Okay. There's also, the other thing I wanted to talk about briefly is the job loss, to reemphasize that each and every one of these trade agreements has led to the loss of jobs in the United States. As Mike pointed out, there's about 6 million jobs lost as a result of NAFTA. What he didn't point out was that when NAFTA was enacted, the trade deficit with Canada and Mexico was about $17 billion a year. That trade deficit is now $176 billion a year, okay? And every dollar of trade deficit translates into lost jobs in the United States. Recently, a quote free trade deal was struck with Korea. It's called CORUS, C-O-R-U-S, and it went into effect in 2012. And estimates are that the United States has already lost 75,000 jobs as a result of this agreement. And while the agreement with Korea did increase our exports by $1 billion, it also increased our imports by $12 billion. So that agreement in just the first few years has already adding $11 billion a year to our trade deficit. So I think it disturbs me greatly that our elected officials continue to support these type of trade agreements when the record is absolutely crystal clear. It costs jobs, it raises the trade deficit, and lowers wages, okay? It's as simple as that. That's what these trade deals do. And it concentrates wealth in the hands of a relatively few in owners of large transnational corporations. The next element of this that I'm extremely unhappy about is the secrecy surrounding it. Without the leaks, there would be no public knowledge of what is in these trade agreements. There's 605, some say 700. There's in that neighborhood number of multinational corporations that have access to the texts, but the rest of us don't. And that is just a basic affront to our rights as citizens. Congress people can request to read specific chapters of the text, are not allowed to have aides, they're not allowed to take notes, and they cannot speak about what they've said after they've read it. It's considered a violation of national security. And so there's absolutely a uniform blackout to keep us from knowing the details of these trade agreements. And I personally feel this is absolutely an outrage that the Congress people have no right, and the government has absolutely no right to engage in these kinds of treaties without the consent of the governor. And I think that's what I have to say. Thank you all so much.
You bet. Now, Jim, before you go ahead and start, I just want to add a little something to Chris's presentation with regard to food. Everybody here in this room understands what GMO foods are, correct? Gene-modified foods. Over in the European Union, they are banned. So we're already at a disadvantage when it comes to the TTIP. We at least are not going to be able to engage in that particular industry. And I do know factually that there are some Asia-Pacific countries also, and I don't know which of the 12, they've also banned GMO foods. So again, it is something extra to take into consideration. We're already at a disadvantage when it comes to exporting food.
I'd like to ask if anybody up there would like some water.
Thank you.
Is it GMO water?
My comments will pertain to TTIP and the TPP, as well as Trade Promotion Authority, referred to as TPA or Fast Track, and my opposition, of course, to all three. Examining the negotiations that have been going on concerning the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a number of questions really beg an answer. First and foremost, why are these proceedings, ongoing for the past several years, being held in secret beyond the sight of the American people and even our elected representatives in Congress? Why do these closed, secret negotiations include representatives of major international corporations and Wall Street banks, along with other privileged stakeholders who are not only given access to the TPP documents, but even allowed to participate in these negotiations? It seems that the large corporations are given the keys to the kingdom, while Congress is locked out. A couple of years ago, the Huffington Post reported that Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat of Oregon, the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee's Subcommittee on International Trade, Customs, and Global Competitiveness, was stonewalled by the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative when he attempted to see some of the draft documents related to the negotiations of the TPP. The senator was literally locked out. He eventually was able to go to the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative to get a peek at the documents, but like Chris said, he couldn't bring an aide, he couldn't photograph or record them, and now he can't talk about them. But if you're an employee of Halliburton or Monsanto, for example, you're given a password by the U.S. Trade Representative that grants you online access to those same documents. As for all of this secrecy spanning several years, could it be that if the American people were aware of the provisions of this treaty, that they would find it a further detriment to our country, compounding the impact of previous free trade agreements like NAFTA and CAFTA? The recent WikiLeaks release of a few of the chapters of the TPP documents also highlights another outrageous feature of the TPP. Not only are the negotiations being conducted in secrecy, and not only are the TPP text documents being withheld from the public and the public's elected representatives, but even more outrageous is the effort by the TPP negotiators to keep the agreement secret for 4 years after it goes into effect. At the beginning of the newly released Chapter 2, provided to us by WikiLeaks, is this classification notice, and I quote, derived from classification guidance dated March 4th, 2010, declassify on, and I quote, 4 years from entry into force of the TPP agreement, or, if no agreement enters into force, 4 years from the close of the negotiations. Even if the TPP fails, they want to keep it secret. President Felipe Calderon of Mexico, another junior negotiator in the process whose country has a GDP of roughly 0.1% of the USA, gave us some insight into why small countries are eager to come to the table on the TPP. In an address to the Council on Foreign Relations last September 24th, Calderon stated, quote, this will give Mexican trade the biggest boost since NAFTA came to effect. Yeah. Indeed, NAFTA was responsible for turning our small trade deficit at that time with Mexico into an ever-growing trade deficit. How can that possibly benefit the American worker? And would these smaller countries be so eager to participate if they realize the intent of these international megacorporations to undermine their sovereignty as well? One aspect of international trade agreements is that they typically have only a tangential relationship with actual international trade, and that trade is not free, but managed by unelected bureaucrats from some other country. One of the first victims of binding ourselves to these international entanglements is our national sovereignty. So what is our sovereignty, and why is it so important? Most people don't know the definition of it. It's defined as a country's freedom from external control, its independent authority, and the right to govern itself as it sees fit. In the case of the United States of America, whose governing document, the U.S. Constitution, is unique in history in that it provides that God, not government, bestows rights to man, and that it's government's job to protect the citizens' access to those inalienable rights. Every increment in the erosion of our ability to control our own destiny correspondingly exposes our freedom to exercise those rights to usurpation by some foreign authority. In June of 2012, a draft document was leaked to the internet at that time, disclosed that as part of its membership in the TTIP, the United States would agree to exempt foreign corporations from our laws and regulations. Furthermore, as we now know from the WikiLeaks documents recently disclosed, it places the resolution of any disputes as to the applicability of those matters to foreign business in the hands of an international arbitration tribunal, kind of like the WTO tribunal, overseen by the Secretary General of the United Nations. Such procedures bypass the U.S. court system and the Constitution by abolishing the due process owed to those accused of crimes. While it can be said that our court system may have its own problems, the solution does not lie in subrogating the power of our American judicial system to a foreign tribunal that can even overrule decisions of the Supreme Court, and most certainly does not have the welfare of the average American in mind. The role that major international corporations are playing in this process cannot be overstated. One of the provisions discovered in the small amount of leaked material is the ability of these Goliath multinational corporations to sue governments who they believe have enacted a law that negatively affects their profit margin. The average cost to defend themselves from similar tribunal-based suits by predatory corporations is $6 million each. Again, this would only be available to corporations who do business internationally and not the average small business that provides the majority of jobs in the United States. To illustrate how these kind of treaties can impact our sovereignty and even our national security, in 2002 the United States adopted temporary tariffs on imported steel in an attempt to aid our rapidly failing steel industry. The U.S. steel industry then gambled on the temporary protection of the tariffs with a multi-billion-dollar upgrade to their infrastructure in order to compete with foreign entities that were working with brand new steel mills. In November of 2003, however, the World Trade Organization ruled that under international agreements, these tariffs were illegal. The willingness of the United States to abide by the WTO ruling was the death knell to our steel industry. In 1965, the United States was the world leader in steel production. Today, Communist China is #1 in steel production. The production of steel, or the lack of it, is just one factor in many that would be a detriment to our national security. The armor that equips and protects our fighting men in the military is largely made up of alloys of iron and steel. Would it be possible to tool up like we did after the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, given that one of our stated enemies now controls a lion's share of the world's steel production? Highly unlikely, it seems to me. Post-NAFTA, the United States has become a service-oriented economy, and its manufacturing base is gone, exported overseas to countries like China. A few years ago, one of the last major producers of American steel in Aurora, Colorado, was sold lock, stock, and barrel, no pun intended, to China. The identification of large corporate interest as the engine that is driving American sovereignty and freedom over the globalist cliff is borne out by the experience of some of our own elected officials who have tried in vain to pierce the veil of secrecy, preventing Americans from learning about the frightening compromises being made by our trade representatives at the TPP negotiations. In conclusion, I would like to quote Bill Wilson, President of Americans for Limited Government, who said, quote, "These trade pacts, starting with NAFTA and even before with GATT, strike at the heart of national sovereignty, ours and that of the other member nations," he warned. At their core, they diminish the prerogatives and powers of a specific country and surrender them to international bodies or corporations. And finally, I'd like to quote John Adams when he was making comments during deliberations for the Declaration of Independence. He said, "Independence now and independence forever."
Well, I think that you can all see that this is really, really important stuff, and it seems to be flying under the radar as many things that are a threat to our nation have done lately. And you just heard that these so-called free trade agreements are really partnerships that are written by and for corporations to enhance their bottom line. The free in free trade stands for the rights of corporations to freely trump the sovereignty of all nations that enter into them. Now our legislature is being asked to fast-track these agreements by giving up their responsibility and their right to modify whatever comes out of these behind closed doors negotiations, while corporations are having free access to help write these in the first place. Nothing could be worse for our democracy or the sovereignty of any nation, not just ours. As a citizen, it is critical that you speak out now to protect this trading away of your rights, your laws, and your protections for the benefit of multinational corporates' bottom line. You need to act now by calling Senator Cantwell, Senator Murray, and Representative Kathy McMorris Rogers, and tell them flat out to stop the fast tracking of the TPA. Now is the time, as this could be voted on any minute. You must act now, for if this goes into effect, our constitutional protections become meaningless and are subject to being trumped by an outside global tribunal whose only mandate is to consider whether or not the profits or future profits that they project are being negatively impacted by the laws of our nation. So basically our laws become mute. We pass laws and corporations say, oh gosh, we could have made a lot of money and now this law is going to create a problem for us, so we're going to take you to court, we're going to go to a tribunal, the tribunal is going to act behind closed doors, you're not even going to be able, if it's like the WTO, to be able to see what transpired or how the decision came down. And again, those courts are mandated to look at the profits of the corporation's bottom line, not the sovereignty of the nations that are being challenged. If you care about health, safety, you need to call Senator Cantwell, Senator Murray, and Representative Kathy McMorris Rogers now. If you care about environmental preservation, you must speak out against fast-tracking these dangerous trade partnerships that trade away your rights for corporate enhanced profits. It's now up to you to stop the fast track. Please spread the word, send out your emails. We will be putting this up on YouTube. I think that our guests have spoken eloquently to tell us what the dangers are, and now it's up to each of us to exercise our rights as citizens and use our elected representatives to stop this fast track process. Thank you.
All right, let's give the panel members a round of applause. And before we go ahead and open the floor up to questions, just a couple more pieces of information. I'm sure that everybody here has been following what's been going on in the European Union with regard to the austerity packages. Greece about ready to go under, Portugal having some problems, Spain, Scotland, stuff like this. So I'm telling you what, talk about a marriage made in hell, bottom line. Anyway, it's my understanding that the state legislature, the Senate Democrats, did have 2 Senate joint memorial resolutions. They didn't make it through the Senate this year. But, you know, on top of the action, the call to action that we got from Bonnie Mader, i.e. we need to call both of our senators, we need to call our congresswoman. One other thing that we can do here, or a couple of other things that we can do. I would like to sponsor a resolution here from the city of Spokane. And I would greatly appreciate your help in communicating your concerns to my colleagues so that we can get this thing supported. You know, I know that there are a couple of folks here that are members of the Spokane Alliance. We need to get every member of the Spokane Alliance, every member of political parties, neighborhoods, everybody to get involved in this thing. So, and it's got to be done right now because, you know, as you learned, this thing is moving forward through Congress at this point, and time is very, very short. So, with that, any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I really appreciate this panel. It was fantastic and filled with information. And I would like to see, because time is of the essence, I would really like to see this 5-person configuration literally go on the road in town and do forums in every place where people on the left, people on the right, and people in the middle who don't know anything about this gather. And to talk about exactly what we talked about tonight. I think it would just, we need this to happen and happen fast. Is that a possibility?
I'd be happy to.
Oh, yeah.
Spoken to a few different groups. If you know of other groups that might invite us, we can, come one, come few, come all. We'll do what we can.
Also, this is going to be posted on YouTube. So using YouTube and Facebook links, you can spread the word electronically fast doing that. And I would encourage you to use the social media to spread this far and wide.
What about seeing if the Spokane Valley City Hall Council Chambers would post it?
Well, I spoke to Ed Pace, he's a Spokane Valley City Councilman. He was interested. He said normally the city or Spokane Valley doesn't endorse initiatives or candidates or anything like that, but we can certainly go as far as we can that way.
Yeah, this is an issue. It's not, there's
Yeah.
an initiative on the ballot.
Right.
This is an issue that needs to get out. People's awareness.
Yeah, I mean, we intend to talk to them about it some more.
Yeah.
Gary?
My question or comment, the legislators at the federal level are the ones we have to influence the most in the short term. We also have to work probably with the state legislators. But is there any study been done on the amount of money through corporations that are going to both Republican and Democrat representatives that it would make it virtually impossible for them to not represent the business community that's involved in this?
Yes, there has been the campaign records of Congress quitters have been examined from that point of view, and you'll find that these major corporations have been very generous on both sides of the political aisle.
And I just want to say that you speak to another issue that's near and dear to most of our hearts, and that is the whole Citizens United, because with big money just overwhelming politics, the time is running out. When our politicians can be bought, what chance do we have to influence them compared to the millions of dollars that are going into their campaigns to get them reelected?
Both parties.
Exactly.
Oh, you bet. And if I might go ahead and piggyback on that, it's my understanding that during former President Bush's administration, he was held at bay by Congress on the fast track authority for up to 5 years of his 2 terms. And it was done by way of the Democrats and the left side getting together with the unions, because we're talking about union member jobs here also, and then it was up to the conservative side and the Republicans to get in touch with those corporate interests. And I think that that can be done today. And that is something that we are going to have to strive and work together towards.
During the bailout of 2008, actually Kathy McMorris sent out to a lot of us, what do you think? I'm getting pressured by the Bush administration to sign on to this, and well, I mean, all of us wrote back, no, don't do it, and actually she didn't support it. So a lot of times, I said this is maybe either through malevolence or ignorance. I know the other night, Monday night, I was at a meeting, and some of you were there too, and I think it was a man from the Longshoremen's Union that actually got in about 90 seconds with Patty Murray, and he was telling her about the, all the adverse conditions of the Trans-Pacific Partnership and TPA, and at the end of it, she said, are you saying we shouldn't have a trade policy? So, I mean, she just really didn't have a clue, I don't think.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that. This is a winnable fight, okay? I was on a call with a number of groups last night that are working intently. Public Citizen, Popular Resistance, and their count right now is there is 15 or less Democrats in the House of Representatives that are in favor of it, okay? And there's also 60 Republicans that are against it. And this is why it is so critical that we turn up the pressure now to hold the ones that are going to vote against it, to hold those votes, and to weaken the resolve of those that are in favor of it. I hear all the time that, you know, why bother contact a senator, why bother contact Representative McMorris. The reason to bother is to weaken their resolve, okay? They do not like being criticized. They do not like people questioning their judgment. And the more people we can get to do it, they may not change their vote, but it does weaken their resolve. And that's as important as gathering more no votes on trade promotion authority.
And in terms of action items, I would encourage you to, once you've contacted Senators Murray and Cantwell and Representative McMorris Rogers, that you start down the list of the 435 in the U.S. House and the 100 in the Senate. In this day of social media and wireless communications being what they are, it's recognized by most of the congressmen, if not all, that voters vote with their dollars from all over the country in focusing their monies on campaigns from other districts. Myself, I can say that I have contributed to other congressional campaigns all over the United States, one respect or another. And you can say this, and you can tell them that you are a concerned voter, and that you vote with your paycheck and your wallet as well. And when they come up for election next time, this is the kind of communication that if they get 15 or 20 calls or 15 or 20 faxes in their box, it's a major issue to a congressman. So we need to light up their switchboards, and we need to fill up their inboxes.